Hi Circles community. I am doing the video this week. So I just filmed my first take and it was 8 minutes long. So I'm gonna do it again. And I will do my best to not qualify everything I say because that's my struggle. So last week, Patrick brought us the concept of what we need in order to grow and continue our sort of path to freedom is a connection with God, an intimate connection with God, friends, and then healthy information, or he was calling it a plan. This week, we're going to kind of take that one step further and say, if we have our resources for growing, then what are going to be the obstacles that we run into for our growth? So I am going to kind of narrow it down to two different concepts, or two different like veins of the concept of growth, and then have a question that relates to each one of those. So when I think of growing and kind of progressing our path to freedom, then that happens through revelation. And revelation has to, in order to be fulfilled, passes through the three parts of our soul. So we receive new information, we agree with that information, and then we fulfill that information. So let's talk about the healthy versus the unhealthy sides of each part of our soul. So our intellect, when it's connected to God, is humble. And our new definition of humility is just this idea of an honest assessment with God. So it looks at our strengths and our weaknesses with kind of open hands and allowing God to speak into those things and having them not relay any sort of value to who we are as a person, but just saying, here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses, and admitting that I need God. That's also a part of humility. When we're disconnected from God, then we're prideful, which basically says like, I got it covered, thanks God, but I don't need you. And we sort of think that we're just solely self-sufficient, which then creates this barrier where we then don't allow God to speak new truth, new information into our intellect. The healthy state of our emotions are their ability to trust, and particularly to trust God and His ability to take care of us. And when disconnected, they're selfish. And these can even be emotions like fear or doubt, or shame, but our emotions, when disconnected and not trusting, become selfish. And then finally, our will. When our will is connected, then it is able to serve, and it's able to serve the kingdom of us. So it could be yourself, others, or God, or maybe more than one at a time. And then when they're disconnected, or when your will is disconnected from God, we often hear rebellious. But a word that makes more sense to me is disobedient, so I'm going to use that word. So you've received new information, you've even agreed with its rightness, and then you just decide to disobey and go against this new information and just do what you want or do what you think is better. So we'll call it disobedient. The second part of what I want to talk about with obstacles to growing is the concept of surrender. And I think sometimes it can get overlooked, but usually when we have a new revelation of something that we need to grow in, we have to surrender something old in order to make space for something new. So it could be tangible things like, for me, I really struggle with food and my inability to sort of trust that I'll be okay, even if I don't have this delectable item that I just think will medicinally solve my emotions, even though it never does. I'm just always convinced it will. So it might be starting something like food, or it could be something intangible like time that you spend on something else, and now you have to spend that time instead on something new. So my two questions then with surrendering, or not with surrendering, with obstacles to growing are, in your soul process, what stage of the process do you think is hardest for you? Do you think you struggle most with being prideful, or an inability to being humble with God? Is it an inability to trust and you feel like you struggle with being selfish? Or is it an inability to serve and you feel like you struggle with just being disobedient? And then the second question is, if you were to ask God, what are you currently, what's your new thing to grow in? And in order to do that, you have to surrender something. What do you think are the things in your life that you need to surrender in order to make space for newer and healthier things? So hopefully that made sense because I'm pretty sleep deprived. But Charlotte says bye. Yay! And she was mostly cooperative. And I love you all and hope that you can have some quality time with God and look forward to hearing how your discussions go. Enjoy your group.